All right, welcome in and thanks for joining. This is an original story from Hidden Revenge family, and it took a turn you truly didn't see coming. Let's get into it.
The sand hit my face like gravel the second I stepped onto the runway. Sirens screamed overhead, sharp and relentless, cutting through the wind like a warning that was already too late. The sky wasn't a color anymore, it was just dust smoke and the faint outline of a transport jet, idling with its ramp down. The last C-17, engines running, no delays, no second chances, and right there at the top of the ramp stood Vivian, clipboard in hand, clean uniform, not a single grain of sand on her boots. Of course. I pushed forward, boots slipping on the loose gravel as I ran. My uniform was soaked in sweat and streaked with engine grease from the maintenance bay. I hadn't stopped moving for the past 6 hours, not since the first alert came in that enemy units were closing fast. Behind me, 3 wounded Marines were being dragged forward on stretchers. One of them was barely conscious. The other 2 didn't look much better. We had minutes, maybe less. "Move," I shouted over the engine noise, waving the medics forward. The heat from the jet engines blasted against my face as I reached the base of the ramp. My lungs burned. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, not yet. Vivian looked down at me like I had just tracked mud across her living room floor. Slow, cold, measured. Her eyes moved from my boots, to my uniform, to my face. And then she gave that smile, the one I knew too well. "You're not on the list," she said. No hesitation, no concern, just a statement. I stepped onto the first metal rung of the ramp. "Then fix it," I shot back. "We've got wounded. They need to get on now." She didn't move, didn't even glance past me. Instead, she lifted the clipboard, flipped a page, and ran her pen down the list like she was checking off groceries. Then she stopped. Right on my name, I saw it, clear as day. Alara Vance, and then she crossed it out. Slow, deliberate. Ink dragging across the paper like it meant something final. "The aircraft is over safe weight," she said, tone flat. "Evac priority is for personnel with strategic value." "Strategic value?" I let out a short breath, almost a laugh. "Strategic value," I repeated. "You're standing on a cargo ramp, not a boardroom. Still nothing, not even a flicker." That's when I looked past her, inside the aircraft. And everything clicked. There were no rows of wounded personnel, no emergency triage setup, no overflow of injured soldiers like there should have been. Instead, the cargo bay was packed. Crates, dozens of them. Metal containers, reinforced, sealed, stacked tight and secured like they mattered more than anything else on that plane. I knew those containers, not from paperwork, from pattern, artifacts, black market pieces, antiquities pulled from sites that were supposed to be under military protection. Not evacuation cargo, smuggled assets. My jaw tightened. "You've got to be kidding me," I said, voice lower now. "Controlled. You're leaving people behind for this." Vivian didn't even turn her head. "They're secured assets," she replied. "Classified." "Yeah," I muttered. "I'm sure they are." Behind me, one of the Marines groaned, the medic struggling to keep pressure on a bleeding wound. "Ma'am," the medic called out, desperate. "We need to get him on now or he's not making it." Vivian finally looked past me, but not at the Marine, at the stretcher, like it was an inconvenience. Then she stepped forward slightly, just enough to block the entrance. "No more personnel," she said. "That's the final call." I took another step up the ramp. "We're not asking," I said. "We're moving them." Her eyes snapped back to mine. And for a second I saw it. Not anger, not even frustration, just calculation. Then she smiled again, wider this time. "You always did have trouble understanding how things work," she said. I didn't answer. I just kept moving, 1 step. 2, I was halfway up the ramp now. Close enough to see the fine details, the polished edges of those crates, the secure locking mechanisms, the care that went into protecting them. More care than the men bleeding behind me. "Move," I said quietly. Vivian tilted her head. Then without warning, she moved. Fast. Her boot drove straight into my chest. No hesitation, no warning, just impact. The force knocked the air out of my lungs instantly. My feet lost contact with the ramp, and the next thing I knew, I was hitting the tarmac hard enough to rattle my skull. Pain shot through my back. My vision blurred for a second. The world tilted, and then snapped back into place. I sucked in a sharp breath, coughing as I pushed myself up on one elbow. Above me, Vivian stood at the top of the ramp, looking down, calm, composed, untouched. "Stay down there and do your useless paperwork, Alara," she said. Voice raised just enough to cut through the engine noise. "This flight isn't for freeloaders." Freeloaders. I almost smiled. Behind me, the medics froze. No one moved. No one argued. Because everyone heard it. Everyone saw it. The truth didn't need explaining. Vivian turned her back on me. Just like that. As if I didn't exist anymore. As if the men behind me didn't either. The hydraulic system kicked in with a heavy mechanical whine. The ramp started to lift. Slow at first, then faster. I pushed myself up to my knees, watching as the gap closed. Metal rising, light disappearing. Opportunity gone. The last thing I saw before the ramp sealed shut was the edge of those crates. Not a single one moved. The door slammed into place with a final hollow thud. And just like that, we were outside. They were gone. The engines roared louder, the aircraft beginning to taxi, then accelerate. I stood there, chest still burning, dust swirling around me as the C-17 picked up speed. No one spoke. No one needed to. The message was clear. We weren't worth the wait. The jet lifted off the runway, disappearing into the sand-filled sky. And for a moment, everything went quiet. Not silent, just empty. I looked down at my hands. Steady now. No shaking, no panic, just focus. The satellite phone in my grip vibrated once, then emitted a soft, steady beep. I glanced at the screen. Signal locked. Good. I brushed the dust off my uniform, straightened up, and turned away from the empty runway. Because here's the thing Vivian never understood. You don't measure value by who gets on the plane. You measure it by who controls what happens after it takes off. Have you ever been dismissed as useless by someone who had no idea what you were actually capable of, and then watched them build their entire future on that mistake? The cold blue glow from the satellite screen washed over my face as I pushed myself up and brushed the dust off my uniform. No panic, no hesitation, just a shift. Behind me, the wounded were still breathing, barely but breathing. The medics looked at me like I was supposed to have an answer. Good, that meant I still did. "Get them inside the bunker," I said, already moving. "Seal the upper doors. We're not done yet." No one argued this time. That was the difference. Minutes ago, I was the one getting kicked off a plane. Now I was the one giving orders. I stepped into the underground access corridor, the heavy steel doors slamming shut behind us, cutting off the sandstorm and the chaos outside. The air changed, instantly cooler, controlled, familiar. This was my environment. Fluorescent lights flickered on as I moved down the narrow hallway, boots echoing against concrete. My hand reached the biometric panel before my mind even needed to think about it. Scan, confirm, access granted. The reinforced door slid open. The command room lit up in stages, screens, panels, systems waking like they'd been waiting for me, because they had. My family always thought I was a desk officer, a secretary, the one who handled paperwork. They weren't entirely wrong. They just never asked what kind of paperwork requires clearance levels most generals don't even have. I dropped into the central station and powered up the dome defense interface. The system responded instantly. Satellite links synced. Radar feeds came online. Defensive grids lit up across the region like a web snapping into place. System active, the console displayed. Good. I started routing defensive coverage over the FOB first. The incoming threat perimeter was tightening fast. Enemy movement patterns were erratic, aggressive. They thought we were blind. They thought we were exposed. They were wrong. My fingers moved across the keyboard, pulling up automated intercept protocols, aligning targeting systems, prioritizing zones where the wounded were being secured. 1 command, 2, 3. The system adjusted in real time. Missile defense arrays repositioned. Drone overwatch activated. Countermeasures armed. The bunker wasn't just a shelter. It was the brain of everything within a 100-mile radius. And I was the one running it. A warning flashed on the side panel. Unrelated to ground threats. Airspace anomaly detected. I paused. That shouldn't have been there. I pulled the feed onto the main screen. A single aircraft. No transponder signal. No identification. Just a moving blip. Fast. Climbing altitude. Heading west. My jaw tightened. No transponder, I muttered. That wasn't a glitch. That was intentional. I zoomed in, pulling satellite tracking overlays, cross-referencing flight paths. There it was. The trajectory, the speed, the altitude profile. It matched exactly. The C-17, Vivian's flight. I leaned back slightly, eyes narrowing as the realization settled in. She didn't just overload the aircraft. She didn't just smuggle cargo, she turned off the transponder, which meant one thing. To every defense system in the region, that plane didn't exist. And anything that doesn't exist in a war zone gets treated like a threat. My fingers moved again faster now, pulling up regional air defense zones. Enemy-controlled sectors lit up in red, and right on the edge of one of those zones, the C-17's projected path. "Are you serious?" I said under my breath. She wasn't just reckless, she was stupid. No worse. She assumed she was untouchable. Another alert hit the screen, louder this time. Missile system activation detected. I didn't need the system to tell me what that meant. I was already watching it unfold. Radar locked, target acquired, trajectory confirmed. A surface-to-air missile had just been launched, and it was locked onto one thing, the ghost aircraft, Vivian's plane. I exhaled slowly. This was it. The clean version of justice. No courtroom, no arguments, no explanations, just consequences. I could have sat there, done nothing. Let the system play out exactly as designed. She made the choice. She cut the transponder. She filled that plane with illegal cargo instead of people. She kicked me off that ramp. She sealed that door, and now, this was the result. The missile closed distance fast. The system tracked it in real time. Seconds. That's all it would take. Seconds. My hand hovered over the keyboard. No one in this room would question it if I didn't act. No one outside this bunker would even know. It would be written off as a loss, a tragic accident. War is messy like that. Conveniently messy. I stared at the screen, at the blinking red warning, at the flight path that was seconds away from ending, and then I moved. Override command initiated. The system prompted for authorization. I entered it without hesitation. Full clearance, top tier, the kind that doesn't get questioned, it just gets executed. Rerouting defense priority, I said under my breath. The dome system responded instantly. Satellite alignment shifted. Interceptor systems recalibrated. I redirected targeting from ground defense to air interception. The missile's trajectory updated on screen. Still locked, still closing. "Not today," I muttered. I launched the intercept. A second missile ours fired from a forward defense platform, guided directly by the system I controlled. Clean, precise, fast. The two signals converged. Impact. A bright flash lit up the screen as the enemy missile was neutralized mid-air. Debris scattered. Threat eliminated. The red warning disappeared. But I wasn't done. I pulled up the C-17's flight path again and manually adjusted its trajectory just enough to push it clear of the hostile zone. Enough to keep it alive. Not enough to make it comfortable. Then I opened a secure logging channel, flight data, cargo weight, signal loss, manual override records, every detail, every decision, every violation. I copied it all, encrypted, backed up, stored in places Vivian didn't even know existed, because this wasn't about saving her. This was about preserving the evidence. I leaned back slightly, watching the stabilized flight path on the screen. Alive, safe. For now. She thinks I'm the useless one left behind, I said quietly. My eyes stayed on the data scrolling across the display. She has no idea her life just got evaluated and preserved, for a much harsher sentence. I closed the interface window and locked the system back into automated defense. The bunker hummed steadily around me. Controlled. Stable. Exactly how it should be. Above ground, the war was still moving, but down here, I had already decided how this was going to end. The screen flickered once as the system shifted back to monitoring mode. A brief flash of red light reflected across the console, and for a split second, it looked almost identical to something else. Bright, sharp, controlled, like a camera flash, waiting, somewhere far from here. The sharp clicking of camera shutters filled the air as flashes lit up the VIP hall at Andrews Air Force Base. 2 weeks. That's all it took to turn a lie into a headline. I stood just outside the main entrance behind a line of security personnel who didn't bother looking twice at me, which was exactly how I liked it. Inside the room was packed press officers' polished uniforms, and the kind of people who only show up when there's a medal involved. Front and center under perfect lighting stood Vivian. Crisp uniform, hair pulled back just right, not a trace of sand, not a single sign that 2 weeks ago she had kicked her own sister off a military aircraft and left wounded soldiers behind. You wouldn't know it from looking at her. She held the podium like she owned the room, and the room let her. I remember the moment clearly. She said, voice steady, but soft enough to sound emotional. The alarms were going off. The situation was collapsing. I had to make decisions no one should ever have to make. Pause. Perfect timing. A reporter leaned forward, hanging on every word. Vivian lowered her gaze slightly, letting silence do half the work. I had men and women depending on me, she continued, and I made sure as many as possible made it out alive. There it was, the narrative, clean, controlled, marketable. I leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching the performance, because that's exactly what it was. A performance. One of the reporters raised a hand. Major Vance, can you clarify reports that some personnel were left behind during the evacuation? Good question. Let's see how she spins this. Vivian inhaled slowly, like she needed to steady herself. Then she looked up, eyes just glossy enough to catch the light. I did everything I could, she said. And there it was. The first lie. I searched for my sister, she added, voice tightening just enough to suggest pain. But Alara panicked. She broke formation and ran. I didn't move, didn't react, didn't need to. I had to make a decision. Vivian continued, her voice cracking at exactly the right moment. I couldn't risk the entire evacuation for one person, not when so many lives were at stake. Another pause, another flash. A few reporters nodded, hooked, sold. I almost laughed. Because here's the thing about a good lie, it doesn't just sound believable. It gives people exactly what they expect to hear. And right now they expected a hero. So she gave them one. A hand came down on her shoulder. Gregory, of course. He stepped up beside her, positioning himself just slightly in front of the cameras. Not enough to block her, just enough to be part of the frame. My daughter did what any true leader would do, he said loudly, projecting confidence like it was a fact. She made the hard call. He looked straight at the reporters, and for the record, he added, Alara has always struggled under pressure. She's not built for this kind of environment. There it was, right on cue, same script, different setting. He wrapped an arm around Vivian like they were standing at a family celebration instead of a press briefing built on a lie. She's always been the weak one, he continued. A liability. Vivian carried this operation on her shoulders. Vivian didn't correct him, didn't even blink, just leaned into it. Of course she did. Why fix something that's working? The reporters scribbled notes. Cameras zoomed in. The story was writing itself. Heroic officer, difficult decision, unreliable sibling, clean, simple, wrong. I pushed off the wall and walked along the perimeter, staying just outside the spotlight. No one stopped me. No one asked questions, because no one expected me to be there. That was the advantage of being underestimated. You get access. The ceremony setup was already in place. Flag backdrop, medal display. A senior officer standing by, ready to proceed once the press segment wrapped. Everything about this was polished, planned, packaged. I glanced at the medal resting in its case. Honor. That word gets thrown around a lot. Most people don't realize how easy it is to fake. Vivian stepped back from the podium, giving the room one last controlled breath, one last composed expression. The performance was over. Now came the reward. An officer approached the microphone, adjusting it slightly. Ladies and gentlemen, he began. We are honored today to recognize exceptional leadership under extreme conditions. And then it stopped. Mid-sentence, cut clean. The sound system didn't glitch. It got overridden. A sharp tone replaced the microphone feed. Not loud, not chaotic, controlled, intentional. Every head in the room turned. The officer froze, hand still on the mic. A second later, the overhead speakers clicked on. Attention, this is a security directive. The voice was calm, authoritative. Not part of the ceremony. Clear the central aisle immediately. Maintain distance from the landing corridor. Confusion rippled through the crowd. That wasn't part of the program. Reporters looked at each other, staff members hesitated. Then the doors at the far end of the hall opened. Military police. Full tactical gear, not ceremonial, not symbolic, real. They moved in with precision, spreading out, establishing a perimeter without raising their voices. That's how you know it's serious. No shouting, no panic, just control. One of the MPs gestured firmly. Clear the aisle, now. People moved. Fast, because instinct kicks in before understanding does. Vivian's posture shifted. Just slightly. The confidence didn't disappear, but it cracked. She glanced at Gregory. He didn't say anything, didn't need to. They were both trying to figure out the same thing. This wasn't for them. Or maybe it was. The medal ceremony was forgotten in seconds. Cameras turned toward the entrance, because whatever was happening now was bigger. The low rumble hit next. Distant at first, then building, jet engines. Not the kind you ignore, not the kind you mistake. This was heavy, powerful, close. The sound grew louder, vibrating through the structure itself. People instinctively stepped back, even the ones who didn't know why. I didn't move. I already knew. The overhead lights reflected off the polished floor as the main doors opened wider, giving a clear line toward the runway beyond. And then you could see it. A specialized aircraft. Not standard transport. Not routine. Tier 1 command. The kind that doesn't show up unless someone very important is on board. Or something very important just happened. Gregory straightened his jacket instantly. Reflex. Old habits. His face shifted into something almost eager. Of course it did. In his mind, this was confirmation, recognition, validation. He leaned slightly toward Vivian, voice low but urgent. Stand straight, this is it. Vivian adjusted her posture, chin lifting just a fraction. The confidence came rushing back, reinforced. Because in her world, this kind of arrival only meant one thing. They were here for her. The jet rolled into position, engines still humming with restrained power. Every camera in the room pivoted toward it. Every lens locked on. Waiting, expecting. Gregory smiled, not wide, not obvious, but it was there. That quiet, satisfied look of someone who thinks everything just fell into place. And then the engines roared louder as the aircraft completed its approach, aligning perfectly with the cleared corridor. The sound filled the space, drowning out everything else. And just like that, his smile froze. Because something about this wasn't following his script. The blast of wind from the aircraft engines tore through the VIP area, sending decorative ribbons snapping loose as Vivian and Gregory quickly straightened their uniforms. That reaction told me everything. They still thought this was about them. Gregory adjusted his jacket like he was about to meet someone important. Vivian smoothed her sleeves, lifted her chin, and reset her expression into that polished version of confidence she'd been wearing all afternoon. They didn't question it. They didn't hesitate. Because in their world, moments like this only happen for one reason: recognition, reward, validation. The aircraft came to a full stop, engines still humming low and controlled. The kind of sound that doesn't ask for attention, it takes it. Every camera in the room shifted forward. Reporters leaned in, adjusting their positions for the best angle. Even the MPs held their lines tighter, more alert now. The stairs deployed with a sharp mechanical precision, and then he stepped out. General Sterling, 4 stars on his shoulders. No smile, no acknowledgement, no wasted movement. He walked down the steps with the kind of presence that doesn't need introduction. Every step was measured, direct, final. This wasn't a man who came to congratulate people. This was a man who showed up when something needed to be corrected. Gregory moved first. Of course he did. He stepped forward with practiced confidence, hand already extending for a handshake. General Sterling, he said, voice projecting just enough to be picked up by nearby cameras. It's an honor. I was just telling them about my daughter's exceptional. Sterling didn't even look at him. Not a glance, not a nod, nothing. He walked straight past Gregory like he wasn't there, like he didn't exist. Gregory's hand stayed in the air for a second too long, before he slowly lowered it, confusion flickering across his face. That was new. That had never happened to him before. Sterling didn't stop until he reached the center of the cleared space. Then he turned, not toward Vivian, not toward the press, toward the aircraft. His posture shifted instantly, back straight, feet aligned. And then he snapped into a full military salute. Sharp, exact, by the book. The entire room went silent. Not quiet, silent. Because everyone understood what that meant. You don't salute down, you salute up, or equal. And there was no one visible yet who outranked a 4-star general, which meant one thing. Someone was still on that aircraft. And they weren't who anyone expected. I stepped forward from the edge of the perimeter, timing it with the shift in attention. No one stopped me. No one questioned it. Because at this point, no one knew what was happening anymore. The interior of the aircraft remained shadowed for a moment. Just enough to stretch the tension, just enough to make people lean forward. Then a figure moved. Slow, controlled, deliberate. Boots hit the top step, and I walked out. The sunlight hit first, then the silence. I didn't rush, didn't pause, just moved down the steps at a steady pace, each one landing exactly where it needed to. My uniform was still the same one from the FOB, field-worn, cleaned but not polished. No decorations added for show, no adjustments to make it look better than it was, because it didn't need to. The badge on my chest said enough. Senior Operations Director, the kind of title that doesn't get announced. It gets recognized. I reached the bottom of the stairs. Sterling's salute held steady. I returned it, clean, direct. Then he dropped his hand and stepped aside, not in front of me, beside me. That detail didn't go unnoticed. Behind the cameras, someone shifted. A reporter whispered something under their breath. Vivian didn't move. She couldn't. I could see it clearly now, the color draining from her face. That confident posture gone, replaced by something much more honest. Shock. Her eyes locked onto my chest. Not my face. Not the situation, the badge. That's what broke her, because that badge didn't match the story she had been telling for the past 2 weeks. Her lips parted slightly like she was about to say something. Nothing came out. Gregory stepped back half a step. His expression caught somewhere between confusion and realization. He looked at me like he was trying to solve a problem that suddenly didn't make sense anymore. Good. That meant the truth was starting to land. I walked forward, not fast, not slow, just enough to close the distance. The MPs didn't move. They didn't need to. This wasn't their moment. This was mine. The cameras shifted again, all attention snapping back to the center as I stepped fully into the open space where Vivian had been standing just minutes ago receiving praise. Now she stood there alone. No script, no control, no advantage, just exposure. Up close, I could see everything, the tension in her jaw, the slight tremor in her hands, the way her breathing had changed. Small details, but they told the full story. She didn't understand what was happening. Not yet. Gregory finally found his voice. Alara, he said, forcing the name out like it didn't belong in this situation. What is this? What are you doing here? I didn't answer him. He wasn't the one I came to speak to. My eyes stayed on Vivian. She took a step back. Instinct, not strategy. Her heel caught slightly against the edge of the platform behind her, forcing her to steady herself. That perfect composure she had earlier, gone. Completely gone. And all it took was the truth walking into the room. No speech, no announcement, no explanation, just presence. Sterling remained where he was watching, not intervening, not leading, observing. Because this part didn't require him. The air in the room felt different now. Heavier, tighter, like everyone was waiting for something they couldn't define yet. Vivian swallowed hard, finally managing to force a word out. She started, then stopped. Because there wasn't a version of the situation where she had control of the conversation. Not anymore. Her eyes flicked once more to the badge on my chest, and that's when it hit her. Not slowly, not gradually, all at once. The story she built didn't just have a crack in it. It was collapsing, right in front of her. The room stayed silent. No one spoke, no one moved, because everyone could feel it. Something had shifted, and whatever came next was going to rewrite everything they thought they knew. Vivian's gaze stayed locked on that badge, like if she stared at it long enough it might change. It didn't. And the silence that followed, it wasn't confusion anymore. It was the kind that settles in when the truth finally shows up, and no one can pretend they didn't see it. Vivian's lips moved, but no sound came out as my boots hit the metal steps in steady, controlled rhythm. Each step landed clean. No rush, no hesitation. I closed the last few feet between us and stepped fully onto the platform. Up close, the difference was obvious. 2 weeks ago, she looked down at me from a cargo ramp like I didn't matter. Now she couldn't even hold eye contact. Gregory snapped first. Of course he did. What is this? He barked, stepping forward like volume could fix the situation. What kind of stunt are you pulling? I didn't slow down. Didn't look at him. That only made it worse. Who authorized you to be on that aircraft? He continued, voice rising. Security, get her out of here, now. No one moved, not a single MP, not a single officer, because everyone in that room already knew something Gregory didn't. And he was about to learn it the hard way. Did you hear me? He shouted, turning toward the nearest officer. Remove her, enough. Sterling's voice cut through the air like a blade. Sharp, controlled, final. Gregory froze, slowly turned back. Sterling didn't raise his voice, didn't need to. Close your mouth, Colonel, he said, each word measured. You're speaking to the officer who directed the intelligence network that kept 4,000 Marines alive last week. Silence hit again, harder this time. Not confusion, impact. Gregory blinked, once, twice, like his brain needed time to catch up. That's not, he started. Sterling took one step forward. That was enough. Gregory stopped talking. I kept walking, straight toward Vivian. No anger, no emotion on display, just purpose. She tried to step back again. There was nowhere to go. Her breathing was uneven now, shoulders tight, hands twitching slightly at her sides like she didn't know what to do with them. Good, that meant the control was gone. And without control she had nothing. I stopped right in front of her, close enough that she had to look at me. Really look this time, not past me, not through me, at me. You said there wasn't enough room, I said. My voice stayed level. No edge, no heat, just facts. Her throat moved as she swallowed. No answer. I reached into my uniform pocket and pulled out a folded document. Standard military print. Stamped. Marked. Not something you fake. Not something you explain away. I unfolded it slowly. Let the paper catch the light. Let the red classification stamp sit right where every camera could see it. Then I held it up between us. You remember this? I asked. Her eyes dropped to it instantly. Recognition hit before she could hide it. The flight manifest, original, unedited, pulled directly from the system logs she thought she controlled. You left me and 3 wounded Marines on that runway because of weight limits. I continued, still calm, still steady, no need to raise my voice. The room was already listening. So go ahead, I added. Explain something to me. I shifted the document slightly, angling it so Sterling and every camera behind him had a clear view. Explain why this aircraft was carrying 4 tons of undeclared cargo listed as medical equipment. There it was, no accusation, no yelling, just a question she couldn't answer. Vivian's lips parted again. Nothing came out. Her eyes moved across the document, scanning lines she already knew were there. Crate IDs, weight distribution, load discrepancies, every detail, every lie. Her balance shifted, just slightly, but enough. She took a step back, then another. Like distance might help. It didn't. You don't get to stand here and rewrite what happened, I said. Still calm, still controlled. You made a call. I'm just making sure everyone understands what that call actually was. A reporter near the front raised their camera higher. Another leaned forward, trying to read the document. No one interrupted, because no one wanted to miss this. Vivian shook her head slightly, like denial was still an option. That's not, she started, voice cracking. That's classified, I cut in. Until you turned off your transponder and flew a ghost aircraft straight into a hostile defense zone. That landed. Hard. Her breathing spiked. She looked at Gregory, for help, for direction, for anything. He didn't move, didn't speak, because for the first time he didn't have control either. And just so we're clear, I added, lowering the document slightly, but not putting it away. Every second of that flight was logged. Every system override, every missing signal. I let that sit, then finished it. Every decision you made. Vivian's legs looked unsteady now. Her posture collapsed inward, the confident officer from earlier, completely gone. What was left was someone exposed, cornered, real. This isn't a misunderstanding, I said. No sarcasm, no humor, just truth. This is evidence. The word hung in the air, heavy, permanent. Behind me I could hear movement, subtle, measured, metal shifting, boots adjusting. The MPs weren't rushing, they didn't need to. This wasn't chaos, this was procedure. Vivian's chest rose sharply as she tried to catch her breath. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for something, anything that still worked in her favor. There was nothing left. The cameras were still rolling, the officers were still watching. Sterling hadn't moved. And I was still standing right in front of her, holding the truth. She whispered something under her breath. I didn't catch it, didn't need to, because whatever she said, it didn't change anything. I folded the document once, clean, precise, and let it drop slightly at my side. The wind from the aircraft still moved through the open space, catching the edge of the paper just enough to make it flutter. A soft, sharp sound, paper shifting, light, controlled. But underneath that, another sound started to build. Metal, distinct, final, the kind you don't mistake. Cuffs, getting ready to close. The MPs stepped forward from behind General Sterling, and just like that, the atmosphere shifted from a medal ceremony to a federal arrest. No announcement. No dramatic buildup. Just movement. Precise. Controlled. Final. Vivian saw it before anyone said a word. And that's when she broke. No, this isn't right, she choked out, her voice snapping apart as she grabbed onto Gregory's jacket like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Dad, do something. She's lying. She's twisting everything. Her grip tightened, fingers digging into the fabric. She's always done this. Vivian rushed, words spilling out too fast now. She manipulates things. She makes herself look important. I didn't interrupt. Didn't react. Because this always happens the same way. When the story falls apart, they don't fix it. They panic. Gregory stepped forward again, pulling himself together just enough to raise his voice. Stop right there, he snapped at the MPs, throwing a hand up like he could physically halt them. This is a misunderstanding, a family matter. No one stopped. The MPs kept moving, boots steady, eyes forward. He raised his voice higher. I said stop. Gregory barked. You don't have jurisdiction here. I know people at the Pentagon. I'll make one call and have every one of you reassigned before the end of the day. Nothing, not even a glance. That's the thing about real authority. It doesn't respond to noise. It just keeps going. Gregory turned towards Sterling, trying to regain control of the situation. General, with all due respect, he said, forcing his tone into something more controlled. This has gone too far. My daughter has just been recommended for a commendation. You're allowing an unverified accusation to derail. Sterling didn't let him finish. You're out of your depth, he said flatly. That was it. No explanation, no argument, just a statement. Gregory froze again, because deep down, he knew that tone. He'd used it before, just never on himself. Vivian's breathing had turned uneven, almost frantic now. She looked at me again, eyes wide, desperate. This isn't real, she said, shaking her head. You can't just walk in here, and I didn't walk in, I said calmly. I was brought in. That difference mattered. A lot. Her mouth opened again, but this time nothing came out. Because the structure she had built her confidence on was gone. Completely gone. Gregory stepped closer to me, lowering his voice slightly, trying a different angle. Whatever this is, he said, teeth tight. You've made your point. You embarrassed her. Congratulations. Now end it. I looked at him. Really looked this time. For the first time since I walked in. You still think this is about embarrassment, I said. No sarcasm, just clarity. That's your problem. He didn't answer. Because there wasn't a version of this where he was right. Behind him, the MPs had closed the distance. Not rushing, not aggressive, just inevitable. Vivian saw them coming, and whatever control she had left collapsed completely. No, she gasped, grabbing Gregory again. No, they can't do this. Dad, tell them to stop. Her voice broke on the last word. Not controlled anymore, not calculated. Real fear. Gregory's hand hovered in the air for a second, like he still believed he could fix it. Like this was just a conversation that got out of hand. It's not too late, he said quickly, turning back to Sterling. We can resolve this quietly. There's no need to escalate. I reached into my pocket again. Not for the document this time. For something smaller, a compact control device. Standard issue. Secure. I held it for a second, then pressed one button, a soft click. And then the speakers came alive. Not the microphones, not the press system. The base-wide audio network. Every speaker in the hall, every external unit connected to it. All at once. The recording started without introduction. Vivian's voice, clear, undeniable. Shut off of the transponder, she said in the recording tone, sharp, impatient. We're not risking inspection, just reroute and get us out. The room froze, completely, even Vivian. Her grip on Gregory loosened slightly, like her body couldn't process what it was hearing. The recording continued. And what about the extra personnel? Another voice asked. A pause. Then Vivian again. Colder this time. Leave them, we don't have the weight margin. Cargo comes first. No distortion, no interference. Clean, direct, real. Vivian's head shook slowly, her lips barely moving. That's not, she whispered. The recording didn't stop. A second voice came through, familiar, too familiar. "Gregory, do it," his voice said, calm and certain. "I'll fix the customs logs when you land. No one's going to check." That was the moment. The exact second everything ended, not because of what was said, but because of who said it. Gregory's face drained of color. Completely, he didn't speak, didn't move, didn't even blink. Because there was no version of this where he could talk his way out. Not anymore. Around us, the room had gone still. Not quiet in confusion, still in understanding. The kind that settles in when denial is no longer possible. The recording played the final seconds. Then a sharp tone, clean, final, the audio cut. And for half a second, nothing, no movement, no sound. Then Vivian screamed, raw, uncontrolled. "No, this isn't real, this isn't." The MPs moved in. Fast this time, not aggressive, efficient. 1 step, 2, hands secured, wrists pulled back. The metal snapped into place with a clean, unmistakable sound. Cuffs, locked. Vivian struggled for a second, instinct more than resistance. It didn't matter, the hold was already set. Gregory didn't move, didn't react. He just stood there, watching. As everything he built, everything he protected, collapsed in front of him, and there was nothing left he could say to stop it. Vivian was forced face down against the hood of the armored vehicle, her expensive dress twisted out of place. Makeup smeared beyond recognition. 2 weeks ago, she stood in perfect lighting, telling a clean story. Now she couldn't even hold her head up. One MP secured her wrists tighter, checking the cuffs without a word. Another stepped back, scanning the perimeter like this was just another operation, because to them, it was routine, procedure, clean execution. Vivian tried to lift her head, but the pressure on her back pushed her down again. Her voice came out broken, muffled against the metal. "Get off me, do you even know who I am?" No one answered, because now that question didn't matter anymore. Behind her, Gregory finally moved. Not forward, down. His legs gave out before his pride did. He dropped to his knees on the pavement in front of me, hands shaking, breath uneven, like his body couldn't keep up with the reality hitting him. For a second, I almost didn't recognize him. This wasn't the man who controlled every room he walked into. This wasn't the voice that used to decide who mattered and who didn't. This was someone else. Someone stripped of everything he thought made him untouchable. "Alara." He said my name, coming out like it cost him something. I didn't respond. He shifted closer, one knee dragging slightly against the asphalt. "Please," he added, voice breaking now. "Listen to me." There it was, not authority, not control, begging. "We're family," he said quickly, like the words could fix something. "Whatever happened, whatever mistakes were made, we can handle this. Quietly. We don't need to destroy each other over this." I looked down at him, really looked. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't see a father. I saw a man who had spent decades deciding my value based on convenience. A man who called me weak, a liability, a disappointment. And now he needed me. "Please," he said again, voice shaking harder. "I was wrong, I admit that, but you can't do this. You can't destroy your own family." That word again, family, always used when it benefits them, never when it costs them. Behind him, Vivian struggled again, her voice rising into something closer to panic. "Dad, don't just kneel there, do something." She pulled against the cuffs. It didn't work. It never does. Gregory turned his head slightly, just enough to acknowledge her voice. Then he looked back at me, desperate now, completely. "She made a mistake," he said quickly. "We'll fix it, I'll fix it, I always do." That part was true. He always fixed things. Records, stories, people. But this wasn't something he could rewrite. I stepped forward, 1 step. That was enough to make him look up. Hope flickered across his face. "Wrong move." "You still don't understand," I said. My voice stayed level. No anger, no raised tone, just clarity. "This isn't something you can fix." His expression shifted. Confusion, then realization. Slow, painful, final. "I am fixing it." That landed harder than anything else I could have said. Because it was true. I wasn't reacting. I wasn't retaliating. I was correcting. Gregory's shoulders dropped slightly, like something inside him finally gave up. "No," he said quietly. I didn't look at him anymore. I looked past him, at Vivian. She had gone still. Not calm, just still. like her body had run out of ways to fight what was happening. I walked toward her, slow, controlled, each step deliberate. The MPs didn't stop me, didn't need to. They stepped aside just enough, because this part. They understood. I stopped next to her, close enough that she could hear me without raising my voice. Her breathing was uneven, sharp, like she was still trying to find control she didn't have anymore. "You said something on that runway," I said. No response. Just the sound of her breath. I reached forward, not aggressively, not rushed, and grabbed the metal pinned to her uniform. The one she was about to receive. The one built on a lie. The one she thought defined her. My fingers closed around it, firm. Then I pulled. The pin snapped loose with a sharp, clean sound. No resistance. It never had any real weight. I held it up for a second. Let it catch the light, let everyone see it. Then I looked down at her. "And you were right," I said. My voice didn't change. Didn't need to. That flight was only for people with value. A pause. Just long enough. That's why you're getting on a different ride. I let the metal fall. It hit the pavement with a metallic clink. Loud, clear, final. Vivian flinched at the sound. Not because it hurt, because she understood what it meant. Behind me, Gregory didn't say anything. He couldn't. There was nothing left to say. No argument. No leverage. No control. The flashing lights from the MP's vehicles reflected off the pavement, red and sharp, cutting across the scene in steady pulses. Everything was visible now. No shadows, no hiding, just consequences. The kind you can't talk your way out of. The kind you can't outrank. The kind you earn, and for the first time, they were finally facing it. The 2 military police vehicles sped off with sirens cutting through the air, and just like that, everything went quiet. Not peaceful, not calm, just empty, the kind of silence that settles in after something irreversible happens. No more cameras flashing. No more voices trying to control the story. No more applause. I stood there for a moment watching the vehicles disappear past the edge of the runway. Vivian was gone, taken out of the spotlight the same way she built it, fast, controlled, and without asking permission. Behind me, no one moved, no one spoke, because now there was nothing left to say. The officers who had been standing tall just minutes ago shifted first. Small movements, subtle, a step back here, a glance away there. They weren't leaving, not yet. But they were distancing themselves from Gregory, from everything that just happened, from the version of reality they had been supporting. I turned slightly. That was enough. They avoided eye contact instantly. Of course they did. 2 weeks ago, I was the one they dismissed. The one they didn't bother remembering. Now they didn't know where to look. Funny how that works. One of Gregory's old colleagues cleared his throat like he might say something. He didn't. Another adjusted his uniform, suddenly very focused on nothing in particular. A third just stepped back entirely, putting distance between himself and the center of the scene. No one stood next to Gregory anymore. Not one. He was still on his knees. He hadn't moved, hadn't tried to stand, hadn't said another word. The man who used to fill rooms with his presence now looked smaller, not physically, just exposed. Like all the things that made him untouchable had been stripped away at once, and without them, there wasn't much left. I didn't walk toward him, didn't need to. This part wasn't about confrontation. It was about absence. The absence of support, the absence of power, the absence of control, and he felt all of it. Behind the line of officers, I caught a few familiar faces. Family, friends, people who had sat at the same table nodded along. With Gregory, laughed at the same jokes, agreed with the same judgments. People who never questioned anything, as long as it benefited them. Now they couldn't even look at me, because they knew exactly what they had been a part of. And they knew there was no version of this where they came out clean. One of them shifted his weight and quietly stepped back toward the exit. Then another, no one announced it, no one made a scene. They just left, one by one. That's how loyalty works when it's built on convenience. It disappears the moment it costs something. I turned back toward the runway. The air felt different now, clear, steady, like something had been removed. General Sterling stepped up beside me. No rush, no noise, just presence. He held out a folder, thick, sealed, marked. The kind of file that doesn't get handed out casually. You handled that cleanly, he said. Simple, direct, no unnecessary praise, just acknowledgement. I took the folder, didn't open it, didn't need to. What's next, he asked. That question mattered. Not because I didn't know the answer, but because of what it meant. This wasn't the end. This was transition. I looked out toward the horizon where the MPS vehicles had disappeared. No flashing lights anymore. No movement, just distance. And for a second, nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, no lingering emotion, just clarity. Because here's the truth no one tells you. Revenge isn't loud. It doesn't feel like victory speeches or dramatic endings. It feels like silence, like closure, like something being finished so completely that it doesn't need to be revisited. I turned back to Sterling. Work, I said. That was it. No explanation, no hesitation. He gave a slight nod. That was enough. We moved toward the armored vehicle together. No one stopped us. No one spoke. Because now they understood where they stood. And more importantly, where they didn't. I stepped up and into the vehicle without looking back. Didn't check on Gregory. Didn't scan the crowd. Didn't revisit anything. Because there was nothing left behind, one that mattered. The door closed with a solid, controlled sound. Sterling took the seat across from me. The engine started, low, steady, reliable. Through the reinforced glass, I could still see the edge of the runway. Clear sky, no storm, no chaos, just open space. The vehicle began to move, smooth, purposeful, forward. And for the first time in a long time, everything was exactly where it needed to be. Not because someone forced it, not because someone controlled it, but because the truth finally did what it was supposed to do. It corrected the system and left everything else behind. I leaned back in the armored seat and flipped open the classified folder, but I wasn't reading a single word. All I could see was every moment I had been called useless. Not once, not twice, years of it. And the funny part, they weren't completely wrong. I did handle paperwork. I did sit in rooms where no one looked at me twice. I did get assigned to tasks no one else wanted. But what they never understood was what I was actually doing while they were busy being important. See, people like Vivian and people like my father, they confuse visibility with value. If you're seen, you matter. If you're loud, you lead. If people clap for you, you must be doing something right. That's the system they believe in. And that's exactly why they lose. Because real value. It doesn't sit at the podium, it sits behind the system. I spent years being overlooked. Not because I had no value, but because I didn't need to prove it to the wrong people. That's the first thing most people get wrong. They waste time trying to convince someone who already made up their mind. Let me be clear. If someone has decided you're not enough, you are not going to argue your way out of that. You don't fix perception with explanation. You fix it with position. And position doesn't come from talking. It comes from building something they can't ignore. I remember sitting in meetings where decisions were made without me. People speaking confidently about systems they barely understood, throwing around words like strategy, risk, leadership. And I'd sit there quiet, not because I had nothing to say, because I was listening, tracking patterns, understanding who actually controlled outcomes and who just talked about them. There's always a difference. The loudest person in the room. Usually not the one making the final call. The one taking notes in the corner, that's the one you should pay attention to. That was me, not impressive, not visible, but positioned. And that's the part people miss. Being underestimated is one of the most powerful positions you can have. Because no one is watching you closely. No one is blocking you. No one sees you coming. They give you access without realizing it. They let you sit in rooms they think don't matter. They let you touch systems they don't fully understand. They let you exist in the background. And that background, that's where everything actually happens. Vivian needed attention, she needed recognition, she needed to be seen as the one in control. I didn't. That's why she was exposed, and I wasn't. Because while she was building an image, I was building leverage. There's a difference. A big one. Image disappears the second it gets challenged. Leverage holds up under pressure. That's why when everything collapsed, she had nothing, and I had everything I needed. Here's something I learned the hard way. Silence is not weakness, it's strategy, but only if you use it correctly. If you're silent because you're afraid, that's not strategy, that's avoidance. But if you're silent because you're building something, that's control. There's a moment most people miss, right before everything shifts, right before the person they underestimated becomes the one they depend on. That moment doesn't come from confrontation, it comes from preparation. I didn't win because I spoke louder. I didn't win because I argued better. I won because by the time I stepped into that room, there was nothing left to argue. Everything was already decided. That's the level you want to operate on. Not reaction, not defense, control. Let me say something directly to you. If you feel overlooked right now, if people around you treat you like you don't matter, if you're the one getting passed over while someone louder gets credit, good. That means you're in a position most people don't know how to use. Stop trying to prove them wrong. That's a waste of energy. Instead, start building something they don't see. Learn what actually drives outcomes in your environment, not what gets praised, what gets results. Understand systems, understand leverage, understand timing. Because once you do, you won't need their approval, and more importantly, you won't care about it anymore. That's the shift. The moment you stop needing validation is the moment you start gaining power. People think power is given. It's not. It's built quietly, piece by piece, decision by decision, in places no one is paying attention to, until one day you walk into a room and everything changes. Not because you demanded it, because you earned a position where it had no choice but to. I closed the folder without reading it. Didn't need to. I already knew what mattered, because the mission in front of me wasn't new. It was just bigger, different scale, same rules, same principle. Build quietly, move precisely, act when it counts. And never waste time trying to be seen by people who don't understand what they're looking at. Because in the end, the ones who get underestimated are usually the ones who decide how everything ends. I closed the folder and rested it on my lap, but my mind was already running through something else, not what happened, how it happened. Because if there's one thing people get wrong about power, it's this. They think it's loud, they think it's fast, they think it's emotional. It's not. Real power is quiet, slow, and extremely precise. If I had reacted the moment Vivian kicked me off that aircraft, everything would have ended right there, not for her, for me. That's the part people don't understand. When you react emotionally, you're stepping into a game you don't control. And when you don't control the game, you don't control the outcome. I could have shouted on that runway, could have tried to force my way back onto that plane, could have exposed her right there in front of everyone. And what would have happened? No proof, no leverage, no authority, just another emotional outburst from the unreliable sister. That's how it would have been written. That's how it would have ended. Instead, I did nothing. At least that's what it looked like. What I actually did, I started collecting data, logs, signals, decisions, every system she touched, every rule she broke, every choice she made thinking no one was watching. Because here's the truth. If you don't have evidence, you don't have power, you have opinions. And opinions don't hold up when things get serious. That's the difference between reacting and responding. Reaction is immediate, response is built. I didn't need to win the argument on the runway. I needed to win the situation. And that required one thing: timing. Timing decides everything, not just what you say, but when you say it. And more importantly, where. I didn't expose Vivian in a place she controlled. I didn't challenge her in an environment where she had the narrative. I let her build it. I let her stand in front of cameras. I let her tell her version of the story. I let her get comfortable, confident, certain. Because the higher someone climbs on a false foundation, the harder they fall when it breaks. That's not revenge. That's structure. You let the system reveal the weakness, then you apply pressure at the right point. That's control. Most people don't think like that. They want immediate resolution. They want to set things straight right away. They want closure as fast as possible. And I get that. But fast closure usually comes at a cost. You lose leverage. You lose positioning. You lose the ability to control how things unfold. So instead of asking, how do I respond? You need to start asking something better. When do I respond? And where do I respond? Because those two questions will decide everything. I waited until I had all three positioned. Evidence, authority, not one, not two, all three. That's when you move. That's when it becomes irreversible. That's when there's no argument left. Vivian didn't lose because I was smarter. She lost because she was predictable, She acted on impulse, on ego, on assumption. She assumed she was safe. She assumed no one could touch her. She assumed I didn't matter. And assumptions are the easiest thing to break. When you have data, let me say this clearly, if you're dealing with someone who underestimates you, don't rush to correct them. Let them keep that belief. It works in your favor because the moment they stop underestimating you, they start defending. And when they defend, you lose access. You lose visibility. You lose advantage. So let them think you're not a threat. Let them ignore you. Let them dismiss you, while you build something real behind the scenes. Because when you finally move, it won't feel like a fight. It'll feel like a conclusion. Another thing people miss. You don't need to be the loudest person in the room. You need to be the most prepared. There's a difference. Anyone can speak. Not everyone can prove. And when the moment comes, proof wins. Every time. You don't need to raise your voice when the facts speak for you. You don't need to argue when the system already confirms your position. You don't need to convince people when the outcome is already visible. That's what control looks like. It doesn't look dramatic. It looks inevitable. And that's exactly what happened. By the time I stepped into that room, there was no version of events where Vivian walked away clean. Not because I attacked her, but because I positioned everything so the truth would surface in a place she couldn't escape. That's the goal. Not to win emotionally, to win structurally. So if you're dealing with a situation right now, work, family, anything, where someone is pushing you, dismissing you, underestimating you, pause. Don't react. Not yet. Start observing. Start documenting. Start understanding the system you're in. Figure out what actually matters, what actually moves outcomes. And then Nate. Not passively, strategically, because when you finally act, it shouldn't feel like you're trying to win. It should feel like the result was already decided. That's when you know you did it right. I leaned back slightly as the vehicle moved forward steady and controlled. Same as everything else. No sudden moves, no unnecessary noise, just direction, because power isn't about being seen. It's about being exact. And once you understand that, you stop chasing control and you start operating with it. The vehicle rolled forward steady and quiet, and somewhere along that movement, I realized something I didn't expect. I didn't feel anything. No satisfaction, no relief, no sense of victory, just stillness. For a long time, I thought this moment would feel different. I thought there would be some kind of emotional payoff, some kind of release after everything that happened. But there wasn't. And that's when it finally clicked. Most people misunderstand what revenge actually is. They think it's about making the other person feel what you felt. Pain, humiliation, loss. They imagine some dramatic moment where everything balances out, but real revenge. It doesn't feel like that. It feels like indifference. It feels like reaching a point where the person who hurt you no longer has any effect on you at all. Not emotionally, not mentally, not even as a distraction. And that's exactly where I was. 2 weeks ago, Vivian controlled the narrative. She controlled the perception. She controlled how people saw me. Now she didn't control anything. But more importantly, neither did I, because I wasn't trying to control her anymore. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I wasn't trying to win. I was done. And that's the part no one prepares you for. The moment where you stop needing closure, because you've already outgrown the situation that required it. Vivian built her entire identity on being seen, being recognized, being validated. Everything she did was designed to maintain that image. And the moment it cracked, she collapsed with it. Because if your identity depends on how others see you, you're always one moment away from losing everything. I learned that early, not because I was smarter, because I was ignored. When no one is validating you, you're forced to build something else, something internal, something stable, something that doesn't disappear when the room turns against you. That's the difference. Vivian needed the room. I didn't. And that's why when everything fell apart, she had nothing left, and I had everything I needed. Let me say this directly. If you're chasing validation right now, from family, from work, from people who keep moving the goalposts on you, stop. You're playing a game that doesn't have a winning condition, because the moment they control your sense of worth, they control you. And that's not power, that's dependence. Real power starts when you no longer need their approval. Not because you don't care, but because you've built something that doesn't require it. That's when things change. You stop explaining yourself. You stop defending your position. You stop trying to be understood by people who never intended to understand you in the first place. And instead, you start building, quietly, consistently, without needing permission. Here's another truth most people avoid. You don't need to destroy people who hurt you. You just need to outgrow them. Because once you do, they lose relevance. And relevance is everything. Think about it. The person who hurt you only has power as long as they take up space in your decisions, in your thoughts, in your emotions. The moment they stop affecting how you move, they're done. Not because you ended them, because you moved beyond them. That's what happened here. I didn't win against Vivian. I removed her from the equation, completely. And once that happened, there was nothing left to fight. No reason to look back. No reason to hold on to anything. Just forward. That's it. The vehicle slowed slightly as we approached the next checkpoint. Routine, controlled, predictable. Exactly how things should be. I looked out the window briefly. Clear sky, open space. No noise, no chaos, just direction. That's what freedom actually looks like. Not dramatic, not loud, just uncomplicated. You wake up, you move forward, and nothing from your past is pulling you backward. That's the goal. Not revenge, not validation, not even justice in the way people imagine it. Just freedom, from needing to prove something, from needing someone else to acknowledge your value, from carrying situations that no longer serve you. If you can get to that point, you don't need to win anymore, because you already did. I leaned back, closing my eyes for a second as the vehicle continued forward. No tension, no unfinished thoughts, just clarity. Because the day you stop needing their approval is the day you take your power back. And once you have that, there's nothing left they can take from you.
Final note. This story is a work of fiction, but the valuable lessons we discuss are entirely real and continue to happen to many people every day. If this style isn't for you, that's perfectly okay. Please feel free to look for other content that better suits your needs.